Good morning, crime community. I'm here to read out about Elizabeth Barrett Browning. We're still in How to Desire. Hopefully, we can finish it today. Under the pressure of remaining practical, Elizabeth's writing slants and staggers down the page. Robert is being unreliable just when she needs to reply on him. It's as if being his long wait is over, he's taken his eye off the ball. A disproportionate amount of his energy seems to be absorbed by wording the newspaper notice of the marriage and of the joint calling cards. These matters to Elizabeth too, but for purely practical reasons, public announcement tells the world that the Brownings are legally married, not unwed lovers running away together. She's so stressed she even snaps at Robert. You have acted throughout much of the woman's part as that is considered. You love me because I was lower than others, that you might be generous and raise me up. Quite wrong for a man, as again and again I used to signify to you, Robert, but you went on and did it all the same. And now you still go on. You are to do everything I like instead of doing what you like, and to honor and obey me in spite of what was said in the vows last Saturday. Never again will she be as vulnerable as she is during these last hours alone at Whipple Street, surrounded by everything she's giving up, Robert. She's delighted family shares his sense of the romance on the home straight and sending loving messages, but her own people are very different in their final moments. She must write the letters, she will leave them, confession, explanation, messages of farewell, overwhelmed in advance by homesickness and loneliness. She pleads for her siblings and her father to write post-date Risante to Orleans, where the couple plan to stop on their way south. The tone of her surviving letters is the only allay of heartbreaking. My dearest George, I throw myself on your affection for me and beseech of God that I may hold under the weight. I bless you, I love you, and I am your ba. Thinking hardly thinking straight, she alludes only in passing to the parental prohibition that impelled her description. I knew and I know that the consequences of that application for Papa's permission would have been we should have been separated from that moment. At least the house spends half part, 3 or 4 precisely, while her father and siblings are eating. Elizabeth, Wilson, and Flush make their way around the corner to Hodgson's British and Foreign Subscription Library in what is now 45 New Cavendish Street, where behind the smart iconic columns of the Sade, Robert is writing in the reading room. The following morning, they're in France, and there's suddenly no more need for secrecy, adrenaline, or headlong flight. It's as if nothing feels quite real yet. Elizabeth sets an unrealistic pace, and she will admit to Arabelle. After the Havre passage, which was a miserable thing in all the ways, we were all three of us exhausted either by the sea or the sorrow, and Wilson and I lay down for a few hours and had coffee and what else we could take. This till 9 o'clock in the evening, when the diligence ran out for Rowan. The railway line is only open beyond Rowan, and so this dreamlike progress continues by diligence. Now 5 horses, now 7, all looking wild and loosely harnessed, some of them white, some brown, some black, with the manes leaping, and they galloped, and the white reins dripping down over their heels. Such a fantastic scene it was in the moonlight, and I, who was little feverish, began to see it all in a vision, and to doubt whether it was in or out of the body. But as Rowan, they came abruptly back to earth. They were mixed up with the luggage, which had already been loaded over into an overnight train, and so I prevailed over the fears, and after the rest of the 20 minutes at the Rowan Hotel, coffee and breaking of bread, Robert in his infinite tenderness would insist on carrying me between the lines of the strange foreign faces in the traveler's room, back again to the coupe of the diligence which was placed on the railway, and so we rolled on towards Paris. At the terminus the following morning, we were deposited at the Menagerie Hotel in a great noisy court, taking and not choosing the hotel. We still had good coffee and everything was clean and everybody courteous to the top of our courtesy. And while I lay resting, Robert went on to speak to Miss Jameson. She was not home. He left a note by now and was so thoroughly worn out of the anxiety, agitation, fatigue, and effect of the sea voyage, together with that of having scarcely eaten anything for 3 weeks, that he quite staggered. That made good sense. Anna Jameson is an old friend and woman of the world. Robert's note, come and see your friend and my wife, EBB. Ask her to continue the interplay of friendship and the social nicety that creates the texture of normal life. And she is the right person to ask. Sure enough, that very evening, she came with her hands stretched out and eyes open wide as flushes. Can it be possible? Is it possible? You wild dear creature, you dear abominable poets, why what a menage you will make. But he is a wise man in choosing so, and he is a wise woman. Let the world say as it pleases. Better still, their much traveled friend is used to looking after herself and is as practical as she is intellectual. She moves into the Browning of the much more comfortable hotel, Arnès de la Villa de Paris, where she and 17-year-old traveling companion, her orphan niece, Geraldine Bate, are staying. Having settled them in, persuades the couple to spend a week in Paris gathering their strength. Meanwhile, she uses personal contacts to sort out a problem with their passport. Besides of all, she arranges to accompany them on her own onward journey. In truth, she may be partly self-interest. Geraldine isn't the most scintillating company for the sophisticated art historian, just a pretty accomplished, gentle little girl, thinking how to please herself and loving Aunt Nina in a sort of indolent fashion, enough to wish to please to her, and it could be done without much exertion, and who was no more fitted than to be what Miss Jameson desired, a laborious artist, than to fly up to heaven like a lark. Forever to ever there is discussions about Geraldine's indolence, who had been besought to do this drawing or that, instead of which she lay in the bed in the morning and played with Flush at night. But whatever Aunt Jameson's reason, on September 28th, the oddly assorted party of 5 travelers plus dog arrive in Orleans. And here that next day, Elizabeth reads her family responses to the departure. My death warrant, I called it at the time. Robert brought in a great packet of letters, and I held them in my hands, not able to open one, and growing paler and colder by every moment. In the event, it's both better and worse than she feared. Her sister's reactions to both her marriage and the secrecy it entailed are joyfully supportive, but her brothers are furious. They are very hard letters. I thought it hard, I confess, that George should use his letters for me to half break my heart for such a letter, only he wrote in excitement and in ignorance. Papa's reaction is exactly the extreme she predicted to Robert 2 days after the marriage. He will wish that I had died years ago. He writes that he considers her dead. This is heartbreaking for Elizabeth, who spent 40 years being a compliant, often adoring daughter. Yet in the same bundle are letters of congratulations from friends. Sariana Browning sent her new sister-in-law a portable writing desk. There is a congratulations from Nellie Boardman, Elizabeth Dr. Mr. Jago, Miss Mitford, and John Kenyon, who writes that the very particular circumstances of her case have transmuted that might have been otherwise called imprudence into prudence, and if the thing they have been asked me, I should have advised it. A month from now, mail will post it, Resante to Pisa, will bring more good wishes with literary friends in particular. We hear everything kind speeches and messages from people such as McClory in the Athenaeum and has tears in his eyes. Monckton, Milnes, Barry Cornwell, and other friends of my husband's who know me by my books, as Elizabeth tells Julia Martin back in Hertfordshire, that must be increasingly remote. This is an excellent as far as it goes, but not quite comforting enough. I want to love and sympathy of those who love me and whom I love. And so a pattern is set. Literary and artistic contemporaries and readers in the decades to come will welcome, even romanticize the marriage. But even while they embrace this public version, the couple themselves will have to struggle for years to recreate normal family relationships. Now, whether vindicated or condemned, they need to keep moving south ahead of the weather. At Bourges, they admire the cathedral's 13th century stained glass. In the middle of the rainstorm, they travel down to the Rhone from Lyon to Avignon, where Elizabeth misses seeing the Place des Papes and joins a trip to Patriarch's Fontaine de Valois. Despite objections from Robert and Flush, she chambers across slippery stones in the boiling water to sit in a rock midstream enjoying the spray. Are you losing your senses? But the change of air appeared to act to me like a charm. And she's not the only one thriving. She's able to measure Miss Mitford, that nearly as much attention has been paid to Fletch as to me from the beginning. so that he is perfectly reconciled and would be happy if the people at the railroad were not barbarians and immovable, and if the evil design of shutting him in a box when we travel that way on to Aix-en-Provence, and then glittering, roaring Marseilles, colored even down into the puddles from where on October 11th the party sailed to Genoa. They leave in hot sun and pass a stormy night. Everyone is seasick. By the next morning, wrapped in a warm cloak and quickly joined by Robert, Elizabeth takes her famously strong sea legs up alone on deck to her first look at Italy. It is a love at first sight. 1,000 mountains and their rocks leaped up against the morning sun, and I counted the little Italian towns one after another. The ship was so near enough for shore for us to see the green blinds in the windows of the houses, and one place I counted 6 mountains. Each mountains, one behind another, color behind color, from black to the gorgeous purple to that spectral white, which was the crowning of the olive gives, and sometimes fragments of clouds hung on the rocks, shining as if the sun himself had broken it. It was all glorious and past speaking of. The enchantment continues at Genoa, where the lovers sleep in the frescoed chamber of the dilapidated palazzo. Beautiful Genoa, what a vision it is, and our first sight of Italy besides. At last, after a more stormy night in the steamer, they arrive in Livorno on October 14th, October 1846. And now this is Pisa, beautiful Pisa, all tranquil and grand. Here the travelers part. Anna and Geraldine are going on to Rome. After 3 nights at the Hotel de Donzelli, Robert and Elizabeth rent a furnished 3-room apartment in the 16th century Collegio de Fernando, one short block from the Duomo, the baptistery, and the Leaning Tower, and with a good view of all 3. They're the only tenants in the stucco Renaissance Palazzo of their very most eligible situation in Pisa, which boasts of a grand marble entrance, marble steps, and pillar restored by Giorgio Vasari, whose lives introduced generations of Europeans like the Brownings to Italy's Renaissance artists. Better still, he has hot water thrown in with the rent, which Elizabeth and Robert believe is cheap, though it turns out to be above the going rate. But after they're a new couple and they're going to be as much play as seriousness, and they embark on their first quixotic stab at married life, you would certainly smile to see how we set about housekeeping. Robert brought some white sugar in his pocket, and our general counsels with Wilson, what is a pound, what is an ounce, would amuse you if you could hear them. And practically settle into joyous patterns of the lovers' embrace new habits. We have our dinners with the Trattata at 2:00 and can dine our favorite way into thrushes and Chianti with a miraculous cheapness and no trouble, no cook, no kitchen, which exactly suits us. It is a continental fashion which we never cease commending. And then at 6, we have coffee and rolls of milk, made of milk, and of 9, our supper, call it supper if you please, of roast chestnuts and grapes. And so you see how primitive we are and how I forget to praise the eggs at breakfast. And why not? The 6 months we'll live here are an extended honeymoon. Robert rises to my admiration and is better and dearer to my affection every day and hour, and we have been together a whole month now, and he professes to love me infinitely more instead of a dreadful less, which has been expected. We can picture the newlyweds pottering about their emerging routines like a pair of clockwork mice. How large a part of the real world, I wonder, are these 2 small people? Talking meanwhile, so little room in any railway carriage, and hardly needing a trouble bed in the inn, as Dante Gabriel Rossetti will speculate affectionately 10 years from now. But in fact, they are 3 people, a dog on this adventure, and it's Wilson who must interact with the world to make it all happen, from getting baggage delivered to providing the coffee and milk and bread on which the household appears to run. She's forced to be intrepid, learning languages with impressive rapidity, and when she has succeeded so well in French, to be able to ask the various things she has to emerge all the new knowledge in the Italian, which seems to be still harder still. Far from becoming homesick and formerly shy northern lass of blossoming, Wilson is an oracle, very useful too and very kind. Perhaps it helps that there's a separation of powers. Elizabeth has no desire to be a domestic goddess. Her ideal home life is literary. We are going to be busy. We are full of literary plans, as she announces on day one, and she's more than happy to hand over household responsibilities. The ordering of the dinner is quite out of my hands. As for me, when I'm so good as to let myself be carried upstairs, and so angelical as to sit still on the sofa, and so considerate, moreover, as not to put my foot in a puddle, while my duty is considered done to a perfection. Meanwhile, despite or because of this spoiling, she is renewed to the point of being able to throw off most of my invalid habits and walking quite like a woman. Less than a month after arriving, every day I am out walking with the golden oranges looking at me over the walls, and when I am tired, R and I sit down on a stone to watch the lizards, and she tells Julia Martin to Miss Mitford, she boasts that Miss Jameson says she won't call me improved, but transformed rather. My spirits rise. I live. I am, can adapt myself. She can indeed adapt herself. At the beginning of 1847, Wilson collapses with stomach pains, and she's been alternately ignoring and treating with quack medications for weeks. Elizabeth sends for a doctor, puts the maid to bed for 10 days, and nurses her back to health. Close up, the invalid who Robert married is proven unexpectedly resilient. In fact, she so little does she notices physical discomfort that when she falls pregnant in October, she doesn't even realize it. She suffers no morning sickness, and even when miscarriage threatens, she remains partially in denial. But on March 27th, 47, her pregnancy becomes undeniable and she miscarriages, what the attending doctor identifies as a 5 months pregnancy. The day long labor couldn't be a huge shock, yet Elizabeth doesn't grieve. On the contrary, she is 41, and this unexpected pregnancy feels like another marvel of her new life. She reports it carefully to her unmarried sisters. Toward the evening, however, regular pains came on every 5 minutes, and these lasted for about 24 hours, much of an ordinary confinement, and so very violent. I had worse pain, and I assure you it's not continue long enough to exhaust. And then my eyes were open to the truth. I was a little frightened or agitated at the moment, and bore it all so well, I mean with so much bodily vigor, as is to surprise Wilson and Dr. Cook, too, indeed. She is, true to be told, rather proud of what she takes as a new achievement, even though she's also angry with herself for not having realized what was going on. She realizes she lost the child, though taking morphine, probably correct, and keeping too warm, perhaps incorrect. Robert is less sanguine. He is so dreadfully affected by my illness, and be quite overset, overcome, only never too much so, to spend every moment he has allowed to spend by my bedside, rubbing me, talking to me, reading to me, and all with such tenderness, such goodness. And afterwards, in the first moment of his readmission into this room, he threw himself down on the bed in a passion of tears, sobbing like a child. Elizabeth is touched and delighted by this too, even if she can't help noticing Wilson shaking her head behind the curtain. Visceral reality replaces the fine words of nearly 2 years of courtship, and the first great test of their marriage has brought the couple closer still. Shanty and milk, rolls, sunshine in medieval city streets. The embodied life takes its place at the heart of their partnership. That's the end of that chapter. We're now to the seventh frame. It has been within the philosophical tradition, for which the me includes social, political, and religious thought, that I have found the resources of the exploration of this identity and the lack of identity, this independence and dependence, this power and powerlessness, wrote the brilliant British philosopher Gillian Rose, introducing her often self-reflective essays on Judaism and the modernity in 1993. Elizabeth uses the poetic tradition in a similar way. Of course, Aurora Leigh isn't a self-portrait as such, but its author's lifelong relationship with poetry, from precocious obsession to the literary homage that is her final poem, starts and ends with a fierce credo of arts for art's sake that has nothing to do with the ivory tower, but everything to do with poetry in the world. It is poetry as political action, as prayer, as a way of life. And what Laura Leigh captures is this notion of a life as and for writing. Like Gillian Rose, Elizabeth asks and resolves her life's explanation through the tradition she practices. Like Rose, she does not by stepping out it to reflect, but in the very process of contributing to it. Her poem may not be autobiographical, or largely confessional, but because they are recorded of becoming herself, they record her life. Stephen Spencer encapsulates this two-way mirror relationship between the poet's self and their work in his 1964 poem, One More New Botched Beginnings. It's a memorial to lost friends. She feminologist Maurice Merleau-Ponty and fellow poets Louise MacNeice and Bernard Spencer, and all three were writers and famous ones at that, all to the point of this strange, touching, and rather wandering poem. Life stories get drafted and redrafted, interrupted and lost, just as like poems, it says, of our own continual process of rehearsal is carried out after death to our friends and for famous writers by the posterity of strangers. That leads us to tomorrow, how to be autonomous. That just reminds me, I wrote a poem like a couple days ago, and I wrote the last stanza of it. My friend took it off yesterday, so we'll see if he brings it back. If you think there's any truth and like to what I'm doing here in relation to the world, what's going on today, remember these women gave America women's their civil rights. God bless the children and women, and have a nice day.